Hello, beautiful beings, and welcome to the episode of today. So, in today's episode, this is like a brain facty kind of episode. So, the whole thing is pretty much a bit of a brain fact and something that I'm very surprised I have not spoken about because it is something that we all have. We can all improve on. Well, maybe not all of us. Some of us are enlightened beings that don't need to improve on it. And the beauty about this thing that I'm going to talk about, which you've already seen in the title, it's called the Default Mode Network, is that it is moldable, it is changeable, it is something that we can be editing and rewriting with effort, with conscious effort. Okay, so it's not something that's absolutely like cemented and like set in stone. Okay, so that's going to be the episode of today. And we'll be answering one listener question at the end of the episode. And I thought, because I dabbled into my pet hate last episode, and I'm like, oh, love talking about. I really sound quite negative here, but I do enjoy talking about a pet hate. So I thought I would bring in another pet hate. And this is based on something that I saw on TikTok or Instagram. And basically it's when like there was a guy, it was like a stitched video, and this guy was saying, oh, everyone complains that they can't find the nice guy, but the nice guy is right in front of you, and then you choose the bad guy. And anyway, so it was basically this guy who claims to be a nice guy and was having a bit of a tantrum saying that all the women that get stuck in toxic relationships, it's pretty much their fault because they never choose the nice guy. And I thought that I'd talk about my pet hate around this whole idea of the nice guy and people that identify with being nice. Nice does not mean good, okay? Nice is a behavior that you display, okay? I am polite, I am nice, okay? It doesn't mean you are innately good. In fact, often to be a good person, it requires you sometimes not being completely nice. For example, if I need to protect myself and respect myself, it would mean that I'm sometimes going to be letting people down. That doesn't make me a bad person. That still makes me a good person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I was nice, quote unquote, in that moment. If I, for example, am in a relationship and I don't want to be with that person, to continuously lead them on by being quote unquote nice to them does not make me a good person. There's a lot of behaviors that people will do that are nice for face value, and they think that automatically makes them a good person. All right. And a lot of us are done with people's fucking bullshit. And just because someone's displaying this nice behavior doesn't mean that I now have to date you because you're displaying nice behavior. Because even then, it doesn't mean that you're a good person. So these people that have being nice as their identity need to calm the fuck down and really look into themselves and think, am I good? Am I a good, innately good person or not? Because this superficial nice shit actually doesn't get you anywhere, because there are many people, I know many people, I've dated people who were very nice at the beginning, and I've dated people who were nice for ages and probably stayed with me for a lot longer than was necessary and could have left me a whole lot earlier and saved us both a whole fucking lot of time, but they probably didn't do it because they were just wanting to be nice, I feel like the issue with identifying as nice and thinking that that's my like part of my makeup and who I am is that it stops you from, well, firstly, from a personal perspective, it stops you from defending yourself properly, from standing up for yourself, from standing up to and for other people as well. And it also makes you be less honest, more passive. You lead people on. A nice person is the kind of person that says to someone, oh, it's just that, maybe this could work, this relationship could work in the future, maybe we should still be friends. Maybe, they always want to let people down really gently. They always want to leave the window open. They always want a good person says, I know this is going to be really painful to hear, but this is done. This is finished. There is no fucking chance for us. And I know that's horrible and I feel like the devil and you're going to hate me, but I am willing to have you hate me so you can heal than to expect you to like me but keep you suffering, okay? That is nice versus good. That's my pet hate, okay? I have done many things in my life that do not equal nice, but were the right thing to do. And I think there's many people who have, come across me that think, oh, maybe I was a bit brutal or a bit blunt or a bit cold or a bit savage, or what I often get, which I think is, this makes another pet hate laid into this pet hate, is when I get called a fiery Latina. Firstly, my culture has nothing to do with why I'm standing up for myself, and they will diminish why I get passionate about standing up for myself by making like, oh, lol, you're fiery Latina. Firstly, irrelevant where my parents were born, if I'm standing up for myself and you can't deal with the fact that there's some skerrick of passion behind that, that's on you and your inability to look at your own behavior as to why we're having this, confrontation. But anyway, that's me going on a fucking tangent. But pretty much I have done many things that would not be interpreted as nice for face value, but it still sticks with my morals and my beliefs, and I stay consistent in who I am and in what I do. And that's what I would expect from people that I interact with. I'd rather have a not so pleasant interaction, but it be honest and it be real, and I'm getting you for what you are, not just this facade of, oh, that was a really nice encounter, blah, blah, blah. So the nice guy bullshit, like, fuck off. If you were a good guy, you wouldn't be blaming these women for dating someone that ended up being toxic, because you'd be like, wow, that's really unfortunate that people end up in unhealthy relationships. You wouldn't be like, well, you didn't choose me because I'm the fucking nice guy. Anyway, that's my pet hate. Now let's move on to a more sciencey side of the episode, and we're going to be talking about something called the default mode network. I actually don't think I've spoken about this before, and it's been 4 years of the podcast. And I've referred to it in many different ways, but I definitely have not covered this as like a topic on its own. And if I have, then I have amnesia because I do not recall it. Anyway, the default mode network is basically your brain's resting state, okay? So this is your brain when it is in a task-free environment. Like, it's not focused on the outside world, it's not doing a goal-oriented task, but you're awake. You're in a wakeful state. Now, this default mode network, think of it as like the background mode. So for a lot of us, it's our daydreaming. It is like, okay, well, I'm going to I'll go into the list now. So the role of the default mode network, there's many things that go on, but memory consolidation is happening. Future planning. So this is where you're thinking, when you're not like, you're just cruising around and you're going for a walk and your brain's like, and you start thinking about the future. You're planning this, you're planning that. Self-inspection, emotional regulation occurs during this time. Mind wandering / daydreaming, autobiographical memory. So this is replaying events in your own life. And this is quite common for people with certain kinds of anxiety and what happens in their default network versus someone who does not have an anxiety or a mood disorder, and what their default network looks like. Self-referential thought. So there's all these things that go down during this like resting state when we're not doing a goal-oriented task. Okay. And this is also what you could look at as being on autopilot. So if you're doing a task, but it doesn't require focus, or it doesn't require a significant amount of attention, like unloading the dishwasher or driving, or things that you have already gotten good enough about it that you don't have to be like consciously thinking about what you're doing in the moment, then that is when your default mode network is on. Okay. Now, the default mode network, it's not good, it's not bad. We all have it. It would be impossible not to have it, because it would mean that you are not thinking at all and there's not much activity, intentional activity going on in the brain. We all have it, but there's many people that are going to be listening to this being like, oh my God, I hate when I'm in this like time. So I'm constantly trying to distract myself. I can't sit with my thoughts. So if you're someone that's saying, I can't sit with my thoughts, you probably have some level of dysregulation or something that's going on within your default mode network that makes you feel quite uncomfortable, or it triggers an anxious response, or it makes you feel quite like it's all doom and gloom and pessimistic about your life situation. So you're thinking about really negative past events. So that's when you're always wanting to distract yourself, or you're always wanting to be around people all the time, because you don't like to sit in this kind of default or resting state. For a lot of other people who don't suffer from anxiety or mood disorders, the default mode network can be quite enjoyable. It's like, oh, finally I get some like reprieve, and I can just be alone and I can think about this. I can start daydreaming about that. I can start planning this. You do a lot of planning. Like sometimes For example, if you're like in a good headspace, sometimes I like to walk with no music and nothing because I like that default network to drrr, and that's when a lot of creativity happens for a lot of people. That's when a lot of like ideas come. Also, interestingly, this is what is in charge of, when you're trying to think of somebody's name or the name of a celebrity or whatever, or whatever it is, you're trying to think of something and it's at the tip of your tongue and you can't fucking figure out what that thing is. And then you think, all right, I'm just going to leave it. It will come to me. The thing that's responsible for it coming to you is this default mode network. You're kind of on a bit of an autopilot. You push it to the side. I'm not consciously actively doing it. Different brain regions are now activated during the default mode network versus brain regions that are activated when you are on a focused task. So it switches from where the activity is within the brain. We go kind of like wide focus, default mode network, narrow focus when we're on task. That, and then you'll be talking to someone, blah, 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 you're distracted, you're just doing something that's not high focus, and bang, that thing comes into your mind. You're like, that's the name, I got it, it just came to me. That's your subconscious mind and the default network doing its thing, okay? Same as when you come up with creative ideas. If you ever listen to the TED Talk of, I can't remember her name, but the woman that invented Spanx, what is her name? Anyway, she speaks about how the idea for Spanx came to her, and she would always come up with her ideas driving. A lot of people get their ideas when they're in the shower, and it's always these tasks that don't require high levels of focus or attention, and this idea just comes to you because that's where creativity is at its greatest for a lot of people. Not everyone, especially if the default mode network for you is a time of like high anxiety, all right? Now, the areas that are involved in this network, I'm just going to go through a bunch, but I'm going to lean into one a little bit more because it's really interesting, is multiple areas within the brain that I've mentioned across the lifespan of this podcast. You've probably heard me refer to them all in different times, but we've got the medial prefrontal cortex, that part that's involved in like forward thinking and reasoning and executive function, all of that. Posterior cingulate cortex, superior prefrontal gyrus, the parietal cortex, the inferior temporal cortex, the hippocampus. You guys know that. The medial temporal gyrus, and really interesting, this one, it's the subgenial anterior cingulate cortex, also known as SGACC. Fun times. This is really interesting, this part of the brain, because this is crucial for emotional regulation. In particular, something referred to as extinction, and also something that is referred to cognitive regulation. Now, extinction, and this part of the brain, really important. Extinction is where a fear is basically dismissed through learning that something that used to be a threat is no longer a threat. So it's a cognitive process that this part of the brain specifically is in charge of, that reinterprets something that was a threat or like a conditioned fear, a conditioned stimulus, and turning it into something that's no longer a threat. And that is referred to as extinction. That threat is now extinct, and it's no longer triggering a response in you anymore, okay? And then cognitive regulation is where you are learning to reinterpret a threat to be non-threatening, and this is done through conscious processing, okay? Now, what's really interesting about this area of the brain is that a lot of people who don't suffer from anxiety, they are doing this automatically. They are regulating these emotions and these fears semi-subconsciously, kind of automatically, okay? We have these inbuilt processes in us where we are learning, oh, wait, I'm going to re-look at this, and it's actually not a fear anymore. It used to scare me. It's fine. And you kind of can talk yourself down off that ledge, and the brain's kind of doing the work for you. People with anxiety, they've seen that the activity is different in this particular, the SGACC, the subgenial anterior cingulate cortex, is different. So they're not able to do it. But they found that so there's actually a paper that was published in 2012, and it's called, if you want to check it out, it's called Functional Network Dysfunction in Anxiety and Anxiety Disorders. And basically for people that do not suffer from anxiety, this is done automatically because there is more activity in this particular region within the default mode network. However, people with anxiety, can still do this, but they need to be given explicit instructions on emotional regulation on how to do it. So basically, they're able to do it, but they need external tools. They need to be taught and given these tools to do it. And when they are taught, anxious individuals, especially people with social anxiety, experience the same degree of reduction in negative emotion. Okay? So that just shows that it can be learnt. And when learnt, you're seeing the same activity and down regulation of anxious thoughts and negative emotion occurring, whether you are doing it automatically or whether you are taught it. And that is really important because it just shows how much cognitive behavioral therapy and retraining and training how you approach and how you think and how you perceive things has a massive impact on how you perceive a threat or a stimulus or something like that. So that's really interesting. Check that paper out if you're interested in a bit of a longer, more technical read. Now, the strength of this network is altered and varied during rest versus other mental states. So, for example, we've got this active default mode network, and then that default mode network kind of switches to a way less activity when we switch to a focused task. And the brain areas that are related to that focused task kind of take over, and they're the more active parts of the brain, okay? Now, changes in activity within the default mode network. I don't want to say reduction or increase in activity because we're looking at a whole network of activity. So it's not to say the whole thing is more active or the whole thing, but basically dysregulation or changes within that default mode network kind of point to, they can indicate certain neurological disorders or degeneration. So they are one of the indicators for the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease, autism spectrum disorder, and also depression. And there are also a bunch of studies that kind of point to the fact that changes within the default mode network versus when you look at like the quote unquote typical or typical population is associated with ADHD. And it's believed that individuals with ADHD might find it harder to sustain attention because of this default mode network interference. And we're seeing like the activity is just different when you compare it to a typical subject, okay? Now, people who are lonely, people who feel lonely, basically have excessive activity in certain parts of this default mode network where they spend a lot of time thinking about the past, worrying about the future. They have a lot of dread. So this is seen in people that consider themselves to be quite lonely. Now, please, lonely and being alone are two separate things. You want to look at lonely as someone who doesn't feel connected, who feels relatively emotionally isolated. We're not talking about physically being alone. If you, for example, live alone, if you enjoy your time alone and you have really healthy connections, then this doesn't apply to you. You could be someone who's in a marriage and be extremely lonely because you have no strong emotional connection where you feel heard, seen, fulfilled, where you feel like you can open up to someone and be vulnerable and be supported and feel safe, okay? So when I talk about loneliness, we're talking about emotional loneliness. So basically, the aim here is to create healthy activity levels so all the regions are communicating properly during this default mode network, okay? We're not looking at switching it off, or we're not looking at like, how do I increase it? If you're someone that's sitting here listening to this podcast and thinking, well, I am thrilled when I have my default mode network on, I like to daydream, I like to do this, I'm really creative, then you're cruising and there's like nothing that needs to be done. However, if you're somebody that is like, all right, this is what's fucking me up every time I'm not on a focused task and I'm with my mind, I end up feeling really horrible. I end up like either getting anxious or worrying about the future, or, rehashing the past in a negative way. Like, I should have done this, I regret this, or why didn't I do this, or ruminating or replaying scenarios again and again and again. Then you're someone that's like, all right, maybe I would like to alter this default mode network. And the beauty of it is that you can do it. Like I mentioned in that 2012 study that was published, when given the tools, you do see that you are getting similar activity in the brain region and similar reduction in negative states, okay? So how are we altering it? I've got a whole bunch of things. The first one that I'm going to mention is so fucking easy, and we all need to be doing it. We need to take a page out of like the book of mammals, dogs, all kinds of or animals in general, not necessarily just mammals. But basically it is roughly six or so deep breaths, okay? I'm talking step aside from whatever's stressing you out, step aside from anything, be in your own zone, and just 6 deep breaths. Big inhale, pause, long, strong exhale. Do that roughly 6 times. For some people, it can be less. For some people, they might need maybe 8, but let's just say 6. And this instantly starts to calm down your central nervous system, okay? So what is happening is that you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So this parasympathetic nervous system, I've got a whole episode on nervous systems, but this is what's in control of your involuntary bodily functions, okay? And that happens, and that is at its best when you are resting, when you are relaxed, when you feel safe. Okay, so if I'm feeling safe and relaxed, my parasympathetic nervous system is like flowing beautifully, all is well. If my sympathetic nervous system were to kick in, and this is what's in charge of fight or flight, it's activated to escape danger, or where you think you're in danger, whether it's physical danger or emotional danger. When that is activated, you see a reduction in activity in this involuntary bodily functions. That's why people that are really, really highly stressed, highly strung, super reactive, super stressed, you see they actually start getting, gut problems and problems with like the stomach acid and things like that, because these normal bodily functions are not happening the way they're supposed to be happening. So that's where you see literal stress, emotional stress, play a role in your involuntary bodily functions, because your sympathetic nervous system is operating more often than it needs to be instead of your parasympathetic nervous system. But when we are stressed, pay attention to the bodily functions that are going on. So when you're super stressed, your breathing is shallow. I'm getting ready for something. There's a threat. Do I need to pounce? Your heart starts to pump. You feel anxious. We all know what anxiety, I will claim to say, maybe not, but I would imagine that we all know what anxiety feels like. The heart rate, for some people, you feel hot. Your face feels hot. You feel like you're going red even though you're not. You're a bit like jittery, but your breathing is shallow, okay? And these are the physical symptoms that also will help exacerbate this sympathetic nervous system. So these things are talking to each other. The physical symptoms trigger the activation of this nervous system and vice versa. So when you are feeling this kind of way, especially in this default mode network, when you're trying to just be on autopilot and chill and you're starting to feel a bit anxious, deep breaths is the fastest, the most efficient, and the most, for a lot of people, effective way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, because we are not doing deep, relaxed, long, drawn-out breaths when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when it's fight or flight. We're not doing that. So we're kind of tricking the body into, okay, my parasympathetic nervous system is switching on. The moment the parasympathetic nervous system is being activated, it's sending signals to the central nervous system saying, okay, we're safe, we're fine, we can reduce activity in this area, in the amygdala, in the fight or flight or freeze part of the brain, and we can return back to normal operations, okay? Now, what's interesting is you look at animals, and animals are so fucking good at doing this. Look at a dog when it's about to go to sleep, okay? It will go round and round and round in circles on its bed, it'll collapse, and for the most part, dogs will take a huge breath in and this long, drawn-out exhale. And that is their way of switching states. Not that they were necessarily stressed, but they're like, I'm ready to switch into a calmer state. I want to go to sleep now. I want to wind down. I'm ready to whatever. So they'll release this huge sigh, okay? And then very soon after that, they go to sleep. You look at, so this could work for you if you struggle to go to sleep at night. You could do like maybe a few deep breaths just to like relax into it. You look at animals that are about to fight in the wild. Swans, look at swans. They're about to fight, and they don't fight. They've got all this built up energy in them, this built up, basically you're looking at cortisol, you're looking at adrenaline, they're ready to go. And when the fight doesn't happen, they don't just not. do anything, you see the animals shake, like birds in particular, they're shaking, shake. They're getting rid of all that energy, and then they calm themselves down and they settle. And in no time, they're fine, right? Our problem is that often we're not actually ever engaging in a fight. So we get all the emotions that prep us for this fight, whether it's verbal or physical. We get geared up where, like, anxiety, we've got, you feel the physical symptoms. It's crazy. You've got the cortisol, which is there to action, to go. You've got obviously adrenaline or epinephrine. It feels like it's pumping through your veins. You're fucking ready to go. And then that thing isn't happening, like, because it might just be a thought in your mind. You haven't actually expressed what you needed to say. And a lot of us will just kind of ruminate and fester. And if you're someone that just feels that way occasionally here and there, and you're pretty good at talking yourself down off the ledge, like I mentioned in the cortisol episode, your body has a natural process to down-regulate the amount of cortisol that's being released. But if you're someone that's suffering with a lot of anxiety in your default mode network, then you want to be doing things to help your body reduce this level of stress. This is where the breath comes in. You want to release it. We're not here to hoard these negative emotions, these anxious feelings. We don't need to. Whenever we need it again, the body will produce it again. So when you notice that I've built up all this, I'm feeling anxious, but you got to let it go. The breath is such a good way of doing that. So that's the number one way. If you learn anything from this episode, is do 6 deep breaths when you feel stress is coming on, anxiety is coming on, where you start feeling these negative ruminating thoughts. Deep breath. Activate the parasympathetic nervous system, calm the sympathetic nervous system down, and just chill. Think about the dog that does the big sigh. Think about the bird that flaps its wings. You are releasing, and switching, from sympathetic to parasympathetic. Okay. Now, another one that's absolutely phenomenal, and obviously this can be done with a therapist. That's the most popular way of doing it, but there are ways you can do this on your own as well, but it's cognitive behavioral therapy. This is one of the best ways, if not the best way, or the best way to retrain how you process thoughts, how you process emotion. This happens through repetition, through exposure, through exploration, through counter thoughts and things like that. But cognitive behavior therapy is phenomenal because you are consciously retraining your subconscious mind, and it is relatively basic what they get you to do, but very effective, okay? And this is things like understanding counter thoughts, coming up with a thought and coming up with 2 or 3 different counter thoughts. Like, for example, if someone didn't call you back, if someone didn't call me back because I'm, at least currently in my life, not anxious, I would think they must have been busy, maybe they forgot, maybe whatever, maybe this. But when I was more anxious and when I was dating, whatever, in my past, if someone didn't call me back, I'm like, are they seeing someone else? Whoever they, maybe they're texting someone else, maybe they're this, maybe they're angry, and I'd come to all these conclusions. And it's only through paying attention to that kind of behavior and rewriting that thought and thinking, okay, it could mean this, but it could mean this, or this. You instantly feel a little bit calmer because you're like, now I don't have it's not a sure thing that it's this negative thing that I've concluded. It could be many other things. That's just one example. But cognitive behavior therapy is also, when I was talking about extinction and things like that, it teaches people how to use extinction, how to train themselves from seeing something as a threatening stimulus to a non-threatening stimulus. So that is absolutely phenomenal. And if you find that you are very anxious and you cannot sit alone with your thoughts, that I would recommend, if you have the means to do it, to go to a cognitive behavioral therapist to work through it, because it's amazing what can change for you. Meditation is also a great fucking way to calm down this ruminating side of the default mode network, okay? Meditating increases connectivity between particular brain regions. So if you're someone that ruminates or is really anxious, you might have certain regions that are hyperactive in this default mode network, but others that are not. And meditation really gets the brain regions talking to each other, and it really helps you calm down as well. And then interestingly, I found an article about this, and it was very fucking interesting. But improv is one of the best ways to learn to be more creative and get looser, because it takes you out of this self-critical part of you. Okay, if you're rehearsing the same thing again and again, you can start to critique and whatever, which is fine. But if you're trying to change your default mode network, improv, whether it be acting, they found rappers as well, whether it be drawing, something that's kind of improvising on the spot, gets you out of this self-critical mode and more into this creative mode. And they've found that it actually has shown to reduce self-criticism because improvising shuts down this the inhibition, okay? And I'm not recommending that you go and do this, but one thing that's found to really disrupt unhelpful default mode network activity is mushrooms. Psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in shrooms, basically, really helps disrupt this kind of activity. So it can alter your self-perception, it can change how much you judge yourself, and it changes how much time you spend like living in regret and second guessing yourself and things like that. So if you are gonna fucking go and do shrooms, definitely do your own research. I didn't tell you to do it. But I'm gonna so that's basically ways to start to retrain the default mode network. We're looking at cognitive behavior therapy, we're looking at the deep breaths, we're looking at meditation. Exercise as well is always good. And I thought a listener question came in, so I'm actually going to answer it and give more advice because it's specifically about daydreaming. So let's get straight into it for the question of the episode. Hello, love your podcast and have just ordered your book. Danke. Basically, I've always struggled with daydreaming about future events or potential things that could happen, often dating, that I'm always thinking ahead and not in the moment. It also usually means that I build up unrealistic expectations and I feel let down from things. I feel like I'm always waiting for something to happen and then I'll be present and happy. I meditate and journal and have just finished 3 months of therapy, and overall there isn't too much I wouldn't change about my life. So I'm not sure how to stop this. I feel sometimes my life is slipping past and I'm rarely present enough to enjoy things because I'm always daydreaming about the next thing. I read about manifesting and think that might have made it worse for me since I was always thinking I must have these goals and what's my dream life. But then it feels like I'm always striving and not enough because I'm not my best self. I guess, what would your advice be to maybe stop striving and let life happen while still taking action? When I've let things go, they've fallen into place. I'd love to just switch that part of my brain off because overall, I just want to feel confident and good in myself. If you have some self-love practices that I could do also, that would be great. Thank you. Very good question. And there's several things that you can do about it because this obviously sounds like it's not necessarily negative. It doesn't sound like you're spiraling with anxious thoughts and it's all bad. It's just that you're struggling to be in the present moment and your mind is always about the next thing, manifesting and growing, and my life has to be blah, 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 which can be like enjoyable at the time when you're thinking of it, but then you look back and you're like, I'm actually not enjoying anything about my present life right now. So there's a few things that you can do. The first thing is identify when you're doing it the most. So, I mean, it might be all the time, but is it when I get home from work and I start to like calm down and that's when it's happening? Or is it on my way to work? If you start really becoming aware, you're going to be aware of a few pockets in the day where it's likely to happen more, okay? Then I want you to think of what you can, like some gentle, focused tasks that allow you to be quite present in the moment. So something that isn't stressful, but takes up quite a bit of your attention. So this could be reading. You could more reading, especially leaning into fiction, things that awaken your creative mind, but in the moment, not your creative mind in the sense of like, I need to like do this for my future. I need to brainstorm this and brainstorm that. More so it allows you to imagine a world that the writer is talking about or things like that. That's a great way to be switching off from your future thoughts and all of that and really sink into this moment. And it's very good for you. Okay. So reading is a great one. Doing something like an activity that's enjoyable, like puzzles or cooking or something that's enough of a challenge that I've got to focus. And that's why I always call puzzles like the gateway into meditation, because for me, when I am stressed or whatever, I'll do a puzzle and there's not that much that I'm thinking about other than the fucking puzzle. Like I'm just in, and I'm going to start competing in puzzle competitions with my cousin, but that's another announcement for another day. But basically I just get really in the zone. And you could do that there's a whole bunch of hobbies that you could do it with, but it's got to be enjoyable, but enough of a mental task that you can't totally daydream. Because like I spoke about earlier in the episode, if you're like doing something that's fully on autopilot, like cleaning or driving or something like that, then you've still got that default mode network, quite a bit. So find a task that is really enjoyable. Ideally, also, like if you did a musical instrument, you're A, focusing on something so you're not constantly in this daydreaming state. B, able to enjoy the present moment because you're doing something that's for you in that moment and it's quite enjoyable. And C, you're also learning something, you're doing stuff for your brain, so it's really, really beneficial. So hobbies like that are really, really good. Another really important thing, other than the things I've already mentioned, because of course I know you already meditate, but cognitive behavioral therapy, all of that you've been doing. But another thing that is really potentially helpful is to allow scheduled time in your day for your mind to be free and think about whatever it is, whether it be that kind of thing or that, because you don't want to say to yourself, I'm not thinking about these things, I don't, because restriction rarely works. So instead, you could think, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes for my brain to just think what it wants to think. And you just like, you can lie there or sit there or go for a walk and allow the brain to, and then after that, when you have this allowed time without trying to switch your thoughts, it can sometimes help you feel a bit more relaxed about other times, especially if you're someone who's always thinking about how can I improve my life? How can I bring on this? How can I bring on that? Because we're always going to be in a state of wanting. So don't think that you have to switch that off altogether. But if you allow time for your brain to be like, this is your scheduled time to manifest for the future and think about your future goals and think about, then you're actually going to be a lot more relaxed in other areas of the day where you're like, all right, now this is my time to literally do not much at all and just be in this task, or just have my friends over and have a conversation over a glass of wine, or have, so those are the things that when you have that scheduled time, you're probably going to be less aversive to the fact that you're having these thoughts throughout the day. So definitely give that a go. The scheduled time, hobbies where you're in that in between of I'm focused, but I'm also relaxing, something where there's no like necessary outcome that you have to achieve. It's just more like a process based activity that allows you to be relatively present in that moment. Okay. Also, like if you're someone that's also always thinking about manifesting this, that pay attention to all the information that you're consuming. Like I know that my podcast is self-developmental and self-help and science and all of that. So I'd love you to keep listening to my podcast, but don't always be consuming stuff about self-help, because there's a difference between being aware of yourself and then self-intellectualization. That's a whole episode that I need to talk about. So I will write that down and plan that soon. But sometimes we can go too far and then it's just too much in our consciousness and we're not even applying what we're learning. It's just this constant, I become really aware of the knowledge around it, but how much of it has been applied. So even for me, I think a lot of people are surprised to know that I don't consume that much self-development, self-help stuff. I do a bit, but not a lot. And a lot of the time when I'm listening to podcasts, it's entertainment. It's like I love stuff about like con artists and really interesting true stories and things like that. And that to me helps me really present in the moment. I'm interested in a story. It's, that's my switching off. Pay attention to how you actually switch off, because if it's always self-help, then you're thinking about this is what I've got to change, this is what I've got to do. Okay. So definitely have it, but compartmentalize. I've got this amount of self-help because I'm always working on myself, which I also have. I've got this amount of like fuck around, like just this is fun, mindless stuff, which is fun. It doesn't always have to be intellectual, that kind of stuff. Then I've got this is knowledgeable, whatever, but it's not about myself. I'm learning something that's not related to me, and break it into different categories. And that will you'll start to feel less pressure on how much change that you have to create in the moment, because most of the change that's beneficial, ironically, is created just by being present in the moment. Like you said, when the times that you have relaxed and let go is when things start to come your way. Because when you are present, you are in your best energy to be receptive to what's coming your way. You're in your best energy to be able to make the most of these things. You're happier. And when you're happier, you feel freer, you're less anxious, and everything kind of, it's a positive flow-on effect from that. Hopefully that helped. But yeah, I think a lot of people can sit in that. And I have definitely in the past as well. And the things that helped me was, like the tasks. That to me was the best thing that helped, like being the on-focus tasks, because when I was working on like building the podcast and doing this and doing that, and I still get it. I still fall into these zones often. But it's just this conscious awareness of like, all right, I'm slipping into this zone. I'm noticing I'm not as present. So I need to slow down. I need to pull back a little bit and just do things for fun, not for my overall progress. And I've got to always be progressing, because you are already doing things that are contributing to your growth for the most part. So what is going to be something that slows me down and be more present, like cooking, puzzles, things like that I really personally enjoy. So that is everything for the Default Mode Network episode. Hopefully that taught you something. Hopefully it's taught you how to basically understand what's going on when you're currently in that default mode network. So, a little exciting announcement. I have, as some of you may or may not know, my company, which my podcast is under and everything, is called Mindset Recreation Club. And I always had this goal of turning Mindset Recreation Club into a brand on its own. So I always called the company that, with this like long-term goal of having that as a brand on its own. And I've started this brand. It's very, very early days, but there's so much growth that's going to happen with different things that we're going to be including in different products and whatever. But go follow it on Instagram. It's just Mindset Recreation Club. But I do have the first ever product for Mindset Recreation Club, and it is my baby, and I'm so excited about it. And it is called the Brain Journal. It is basically a 5-week, well, there's little booklets. You can buy 1, you can buy 3, 6, or 12 for the whole year. But it's a booklet that has 5 weeks worth of journaling prompts. And it is everything you've ever wanted in a journal, like a journaling prompt book and more. Because within the book, I talk about you've got something to set up your week. So at the start of the week, you set it up. We've got something on time blocking. So there's literally a way to format how you block your time every single day, or just the days that you want to time block. Then we've got ways to track your mood, your habits, and then like actual prompts for your day. Then we've got a section in each day for just like brainstorming, where you can do like budget, you can write a little to-do list, you can write all sorts of things. And then what is probably my favorite thing about this book, and this is where it kind of leads into a bit of like cognitive behavioral therapy, is there's literally a chart for you to track your own data. So you begin to learn that you can correlate how you felt that day based on what different activities you did within your habits. So whether it be my deep breathing, my meditating, I did 1 hobby a day, I moved my body, I got sunlight in the morning, but you choose what your to-do is. And the more you tick off, then you transfer that information into a particular chart within this journal. And then over time, you are able to see a pattern of your own behavior and how it correlates to different mood states. And that to me is like game changer for you, because you start to realize, I always talk about the real changes with your mood and your overall happiness and your relationship with yourself are always in the little things, and you can actually see it manifest on paper in front of you. It is just unbelievable. And what I love about it is they're little booklets. They're just 5 weeks. So you always got like a fresh one once that one's run out, but they're really pretty, beautiful colors. I've got 3 colors so far. I'll be launching other colors in the future. And they just look so pretty, and you can save them. So then when you want to look at like, how was my overall state that time when I was, for example, like 6 months ago and I was going through the breakup and this and that, you can go back and look at your overall state, and you can actually look at how your mood has changed throughout, from like month to month, week to week, and eventually if you use it for that long, like year to year. And it's a really good way of seeing progress in certain areas and what habits and behaviors were attributing to your heightened mood state and your better mood states. There's also a whole section in there for like growth, connection, and purpose, and it keeps you on purpose every single day with these prompts. I'm just so fucking excited. I spent quite a bit of time putting this thing together, but still trying to keep it simple so it only eats up a couple of minutes of your day. I don't even want to call it eat up. It like contributes, but only with a couple of minutes of your day. So I am pumped. So go check out the Instagram page, which is Mindset Recreation Club. Go check out the website, mindsetrecreationclub.com, and pre-order the Brain Journal. You can buy it as a 3-pack, 6 or 12. And that will be ready to be shipped like early December, the start of December. So I'm so excited. And it is printed and made in Australia. So cute local little thing we've got going on here. Anyway, that is all. Go check it out. Love you guys so much. And always remember, be kind to yourself, be kind to your brain. Don't take shit from anyone, and especially don't take shit from yourself. Danke.